Hello, I'm TheZOMBIEJ. And we need to talk about Medal of Honor again. I love the Medal of Honor series, franchise. Well, I haven't played all the games. I've seen gameplay footage and, well, playthroughs of all the games, including the games I have. And, you know, I've been playing Medal of Honor, Allied Assault, Spearhead, and Breakthrough for as long as I can remember. Ever since, well, since my uncle showed my dad, his brother, and me this demo of Allied Assault. That was pretty cool. It was the Nebel Warfare hunt. That was pretty fun. And there were funny little errors. It was just a demo, but still, it had things like recovered health 50 recovered, something like that. It was kind of funny, but that was because it was a demo. It had placeholder assets and whatnot, I guess. Some minor things that needed to be ironed out. And ever since, you know, I beat the game myself, you know, I played the campaign, played the multiplayer, played the campaigns and multiplayer of Spearhead and Breakthrough. And every time I play it now, I just get this overwhelming sense of nostalgia, because it reminds me of a time in the early 2000s when times were a lot better. Nowadays, the world's falling apart, and video gaming is not the way it seems. Not the way it used to be, certainly. EA is a different company now, quite obviously. I mean, they've gone private this year. I don't even want to talk about that. That is such a, what the fuck, this is a shady deal. But then again, they're a corporation. They do shady deals all the fucking time, so... wow. Well, they were famous for Medal of Honor and Need for Speed Carbon and other games. Bionicle the Game for the PS2. That was an EA release. Or PC, I think. I don't know. Point is, EA released a ton of different games over the years, and, well, Battlefield is a franchise that's an evergreen franchise for them, because they still make Battlefield games. Battlefield 6 came out last year, and it's not that great, honestly. And this year, a new Call of Duty game is coming out from Activision. Yay, it should be banned worldwide. I'm not joking. Talk about that another time. But Medal of Honor was a franchise that had staying power, had the biggest potential possible to captivate gamers, and it did. But there were just problems that made these games fall into obscurity. Why? Failing to adapt to the latest FPS trends, at least at the time, and also just not really managing the series the best that EA could possibly do. They weren't really doing a lot of things that were very innovative, but were innovative for Medal of Honor, at least. Lack of a multiplayer for European Assault, glitches and bugs in the single player of a couple of different games, a shitty GBA port of a PS1 game, Underground, that is, a remaster of Frontline that did not need to exist, because the base game is already pretty awesome. And an unnecessary game in Vanguard that took liberties of using the Wiimote on the Wii. Heroes 2 also did this later in 2007, but I feel like it worked better for Heroes 2 than it did with Vanguard. Vanguard was You know, it was better on the PS2, that game, Vanguard, to where on the Wii, it was just bad, unresponsive controls, and it was piss poor. I prefer the PS2 port. It's easier to control and just feels like a carbon copy of European Assault, just missing some stuff. This was a thrown together game. Airborne was when the series was finally brought up to speed in the presentation department. It looked amazing. Gameplay wise, it was great. The multiplayer, also great. You got 3 classic Allied Assault maps that were redone for that game, for the multiplayer of that game. And wow, talk about nostalgia for fans. It was a great thing for fans. There were also voice lines that were re-recorded from the Allied Assault multiplayer over to Airborne. Yeah, it was great. Rising Sun was okay for the most part. Pacific Assault was actually really nice. Very long and involved game, though. The first 2 games definitely had they were proof. Medal of Honor and Medal of Honor Underground were proof that EA was they had something on their hands here, and it was a franchise with staying power. Allied Assault came around. Oh, it was a legendary game that still gets a lot of respect to this day. It's not overrated at all. In fact, I would consider Medal of Honor Allied Assault underrated compared to Battlefield and Call of Duty, at least the games that were released at the same time. The early COD and Battlefield games just I didn't share the same nostalgia for those games as many of you might, and that's fine, you know. I have great nostalgia for Allied Assault and its spearheaded breakthrough expansion packs. I don't have the same nostalgia for Call of Duty and Battlefield 1942. I played Call of Duty, the first one. I like the music. Michael Giacchino is a fantastic composer. But that's all the game really has going for it is the soundtrack. Yeah, it looks, I guess, better than Allied Assault, but it's just a copy of Allied Assault, but with more interesting features and just kind of an expansion in on itself on what made Allied Assault great in the first place. Allied Assault showed everything you could do with a first-person shooter game. It is a classic. It is a early 2000s classic, and anyone who denies it is a piece of shit. Fuck you. Seriously, get the fuck out of here. You're not a real gamer until you've played Allied Assault. Unfortunately, this game fell into obscurity, but still, okay, it's not that obscure, but it's, you know, the player count is not as high as it used to be. The servers went down, and thanks to EA and their bullshit, in 2014, and as a result, you know, the fans had to find a way around that, and well, there is a fix for it. Thanks to user Classic PC Games here on YouTube has a fixer mod for how to you know, get the servers back up and running, and fans still play this shit till this day because they can, and EA won't stop them because, well, they would get in hot water if they tried to. I mean, EA and Activision want people to focus on the current games that are being played and just leave things like Allied Assault in the past. That's kind of stupid of you, Activision and EA. You guys are idiots, and you deserve no money at this point. Don't buy their games anymore. Fuck them, seriously. go back to the old stuff. Go back to Allied Assault, the original Call of Duty, and the original Battlefield. Even though I don't have nostalgia for those early COD and Battlefield games, I still have respect for them, because that was part of a time when gaming was probably at its peak in the early 2000s to the mid 2000s, and it just got progressively better to a degree, but then it's in the 2010s it was starting to decline, and really badly too. There are some great games for the 2010s period. In fact, in 2010 we got a reboot of Medal of Honor, but for it was modern conflicts in the Middle East and whatnot instead of World War II. And so the 2010 reboot, as controversial as it was, it did prove that EA was capable of taking a big risk when it came to the Medal of Honor franchise. And they did it. It was a bold move on their part. The single player was an explosive campaign that really, felt like it was the necessary step that they needed to go. Now, the multiplayer was outsourced to DICE in a different engine, and they ended up using that engine for the entirety of the second game, Warfighter. Warfighter was a critical and financial failure. It was a piece of shit. There were so many problems. Console ports had poorer graphics, apparently, lower quality graphics, and there were bugs and glitches in the single player. Multiplayer was kind of plagued as well. It just felt like another middle-of-the-road average shooter game, while also having an abundance of problems. And it was the final nail in the coffin for the Medal of Honor franchise. 8 years later, in 2020, December of 2020, we got Above and Beyond, which was it was a VR title, and as much as I'm not really fond of the concept of VR, virtual reality, it's interesting, but I just don't care for it. Why does Medal of Honor need to be the first World War II first-person shooter franchise to get a VR game? Why is this even necessary? You don't need the VR equipment to play a Medal of Honor game. All you need is like a controller or keyboard and mouse, preferably keyboard and mouse, because Allied Assault had that. So what were they on when they were working on Above and Beyond? Above and Beyond was labeled as the dumbest game of 2020, and yet it received accolades. It received award for the Colette documentary, which was pretty awesome. I watched it. I think it's a fantastic documentary, and it's a nice little history lesson and whatnot. The content that was in Above and Beyond, the music. The music was pretty good. Michael Giacchino composed the themes, while Nami Meluman did the main score, and I really enjoyed this combination of composers and their work for the soundtrack. That's about it, really. When it comes to the game itself, it doesn't belong in VR, honestly. It belongs on keyboard and mouse. This game should have been ported to keyboard and mouse, to a PC. And it doesn't look like it would be hard to port this game to actual PC instead of, being a VR thing for Oculus or whatever. If anybody has the ability to port this VR game, Medal of Honor Above and Beyond, to PC, and remap the controls so you have the keyboard and mouse as the controls. That's what you should have done from the beginning, Respawn! Yeah, Respawn Entertainment. The ones behind some Star Wars game and also Titanfall. It was a one-off. It was a fluke that we got above and beyond. But at the end of the day, still no new Medal of Honor game here in 2026. Rumors suggest that there is going to be a new game, be it late this year or early next year. And if there was going to be a new game from EA of the Medal of Honor franchise, it would be sometime in 2027. But I don't think this is going to happen. And this is where this video turns into, well, as legendary as the Medal of Honor franchise was, let's lay it to rest. Let's lay it to rest, folks, and just play the games that we got. Enjoy the games that we got. Infiltrator was a pretty good bite-sized Medal of Honor game on the GBA. And you know what? The first Heroes game was pretty decent for the PSP. Heroes 2 was ported to the PSP as well. Why was Heroes 1 not ported to the Wii just like its sequel? Doesn't make any sense. I don't know. Weird. Anyway. But yeah. These games all fell into obscurity over time. Because games like Call of Duty and Battlefield were rising in popularity. And why? Well, because they were able to, Activision and EA, for those games at least, were able to adapt to the latest FPS trends and continuously did that over time. Microtransactions and loot boxes aside, scummy stuff behind the scenes aside, there were some legendary titles. The last good Call of Duty game, it seems, was World at War, and Battlefield it was hit or miss for the most part, miss. And at the end of the day, the early titles were probably the best, but I just don't have nostalgia for those titles. Other games of the era of the late 2000s, mid to late 2000s, and early 2010s, and even up until now, all contributed to, they all started to rise up from the ashes and try to outdo Medal of Honor Allied Assault, basically. Thus, we got Call of Duty. And it sort of took off from there. But Medal of Honor Allied Assault was the true OG game that you should play if you haven't played it already. There are multiplayer servers that still exist. For example, Crazy Server 2 mods. I love that server. It's fun, hilarious stuff, enjoyable. And Stoner Server, of course. MLS Stoner Server is fun. Anubis Server is some funny stuff there. It's a classic. It's a classic. I have a lot of nostalgia for that game. That's why I continue to play it to this day on this channel. And I refuse to put the game down and claim that it is not as good as the first Call of Duty or Battlefield games. I refuse, because those games are inferior combined to Allied Assault. Allied Assault is the best. It is the best World War II first-person shooter of all time, and if you disagree, you're a moron. Seriously. You can't convince me that any other PC game from the era is better, in terms of first-person shooter, than Allied Assault. Allied Assault was the best that we got from the Medal of Honor franchise, as well as its expansion pack, Spearhead and Breakthrough, and we all know this. There are still people that played the 2010 game Like, Project Neptune was something that reactivated servers and whatnot. There was also servers reactivated for Airborne and Pacific Assault as well. And it's just the Medal of Honor fandom. The fans of Medal of Honor are dedicated. They will play these games until they can't. Now, with that being said, as much of a legendary franchise as it was, we're not getting a new Medal of Honor game. I'm sorry to say this. Actually, I'm not sorry. What the fuck am I talking about? I am not sorry for this. But we are not getting a new Medal of Honor game. EA is a different company now than they were back in the early 2000s. They were a lot nicer back then. Nowadays, and as even going as far back as 2010, 2012 even, they were a harsher company than they were back in the early 2000s. They started, egos were starting to, trip, and people were just being stupid and just, high above everyone else. But, these people just didn't... They don't make good games anymore at all. The new Battlefield game sucks. Truly and honestly. They're not the same company that they were so many years ago. And now that they've gone private, as sketchy as that is, I just don't see a new Medal of Honor in the future at all. And as sad as that is, it's true. These rumors are all just lies. They're all false. They're generating false hype just to get clicks and clout, and it's all just bona fide fake nonsense that nobody should be paying attention to. The fact that I'm doing this video is making me ill thinking about I just don't see a new Medal of Honor game at this point. They can't do what they did back in the 2000s. The 2000s was the golden era for video games. Some may argue the early 2010s as well. I disagree. 2010 is when things started to fall apart. And this is true even for the reboot era of Medal of Honor. Now, above and beyond, that's still a fluke. It's nice that it happened at all, but it should have been a PC game, much like Allied Assault, for example. They can't make a good Medal of Honor game anymore. They just can't. Respawn was able to do that VR title just because they could. They thought they could. It was an experiment more than anything, but hey. Yeah, EA can't make a good video game anymore. They can't make a good FPS game anymore. They can't make a good Medal of Honor game anymore. They can't publish anything that is worth my time anymore. I go back to Allied Assault constantly, every day, every fucking day of my life, because it was one of the first games I played in my youth, in my childhood. In 2002, we got the game. My uncle got the game. My dad played it. I played it. The three of us love this game. And for, especially the multiplayer, the campaign is awesome. It's great. A little hard at parts, but you get used to it. The campaigns for Spearhead and Breakthrough were also pretty good. A little hard, but still awesome. The multiplayer for Allied Assault showed everything you could do with an FPS game, and do so the right way. Games like Call of Duty, and Battlefield expanded upon it and did some great things. But Medal of Honor, they took the charm away from what made Medal of Honor Allied Assault a good game, multiplayer-wise. Medal of Honor Allied Assault has a certain charm to it that you just can't get in modern games nowadays. While there are fan remasters out there of games like the first Medal of Honor, even Allied Assault, there's a remaster, I think, that is being worked on or has been worked on and is on Steam. I don't know. But at the end of the day, EA won't do it themselves, so let the fans do it. Fans can do, you know, these games and probably do these games better than EA possibly could. Fuck EA at this point. They're broken as it is, as a gaming company. Medal of Honor was unique at the time of 1999. It was set apart from other shooters of the 90s, late 90s, and it was a statement on what you could do, on what in faithful retellings of the war. It was a fantastic game. Who's my favorite character? Of course, it's Manon Baptiste. French character. She's awesome. Now, we still don't know if she accepted Jimmy Patterson's proposal, but likely we never will, and likely no one will ever ask EA about this. Because they don't care anymore. They don't care about Allied Assault, they don't care about Airborne, they don't care about any of the Medal of Honor games at all anymore. That's why they continuously shut down the servers as time progressed, because they believe that we don't need to hold on to these servers anymore. Let's give them the axe. Yeah, it's a waste of space on their hard drives, I guess. It's a waste of, you know, just resources to keep this shit going. So, cut them off and, you know, leave players in the dark. That's essentially what they're doing. Well, players have been able to find ways around it. Like I said, classic PC games came across a fixer for games like Airborne, Pacific Assault, Allied Assault, and its expansions. And even Project Neptune for Medal of Honor 2010. So we can play these PC games, these classic PC games, multiplayer-wise, and still enjoy the campaigns, no matter what EA does in the future with first-person shooters. They've done Medal of Honor fans dirty. They really have. They've done gamers dirty because they had to kill off a legendary franchise that was losing the money, sure, but that's not all that they should care about. I have an emotional attachment to Allied Assault and Spearhead and Breakthrough, because these are games I grew up with. These are games I continue to play to this day because they don't get old. During my absence for the past week or so, or less, I've been playing Spearhead ad nauseum. I have bought scripts from Eagle AR and Cheech. Not in reference to Cheech and Chong, but whatever. And I was able to actually put those in my Allied Assault game, and they work perfectly fine. Now, there are Spearhead ones for Eagle AR's scripts, so I put those in Spearhead and Breakthrough. To test something, I wanted to see if Eagle AR's, and of course Cheech's, Allied Assault bot map scripts would work in Spearhead and Breakthrough. So I copied those files, those PK3s, those scripts, and put them in the files for Spearhead and Breakthrough. Lo and behold, it worked. This was stated nowhere on mod.db. I had to figure it out for myself, just out of curiosity. I shouldn't have to do that. Mod.db. Fix your descriptions for these scripts. And include that in the README file, so people can actually do that. Because it was stated nowhere. Not on the README file, not on the website itself. And I will link you to the website in the description box below, if I remember. And you can track down these scripts and put them in your Allied Assault game, if you haven't done so already. And play bots on the stock maps. Because the stock maps are fun. Great stuff. I just got done playing fucking Stalingrad map. Classic, fun map with a G43 sniper rifle. I love Allied Assault. I can't let go of it. It is a treasure of a video game. And must be embraced by all gamers, all FPS gamers. And if you don't think so, you're wrong. You're a moron. You're an idiot. You are a tard. Simply because, well, if it wasn't for Allied Assault, if it wasn't for Medal of Honor, in general, maybe you wouldn't have had Call of Duty. Maybe you wouldn't have had your silly as they could be Battlefield games. If it wasn't for Allied Assault, if it wasn't for the first two Medal of Honor games, your Call of Duties, your Battlefields, etc. would maybe not have existed. So be grateful we got Medal of Honor at all, you bunch of fucking idiots. Play it. Play it and enjoy it. Try to get the servers to work on your end. Client side, I think is what it's called. And enjoy the greatness that is Allied Assault. Be it campaign or multiplayer, doesn't matter. Play to your heart's content. They don't make games like this anymore. Well, okay, they still make FPS games, but they don't make games like Allied Assault anymore. No, they don't. They've expanded upon it over time with, you know, Call of Duty, Battlefield. There was a game called Postscriptum as well, etc. All these games sort of did what Allied Assault did, but in many ways better. But it took away the charm of the original game. And for that, I can't play these games. I refuse. I'll play the Medal of Honor, Allied Assault, Spearhead and Breakthrough, these three games, and even Pacific Assault, and Airborne, and all the Medal of Honor games, except for Above and Beyond. Fuck VR. I will play these games until the day I die. And I will always cherish the memories I've had of first playing the demo of Allied Assault, and then eventually playing Allied Assault itself. Spearhead and Breakthrough as well. I treasure these games. Why don't you? If you're a Medal of Honor fan, post in the comment section below what you think about all this. I truly don't believe that we're getting a Medal of Honor game next year, or at all. Now, there's a Call of Duty movie coming out in 2028 that is guaranteed to be just a generic World War II film, but I guess I'll give it a shot anyway. But Medal of Honor will always be the king of first-person shooters, World War II first-person shooters, for me, at least. What about you? These games are amazing. They're brilliant. Yes, there's some that have some problems, don't get me wrong, they're not perfect, but Allied Assault is perfect. You can't convince me otherwise. Fuck you. Seriously. There's not going to be a new Medal of Honor game, because EA doesn't want a new Medal of Honor game. Look what happened with Warfighter. Look at what happened with 8 years later with fucking Above and Beyond. And you realize that, well, maybe EA is just not the same company we all grew up loving at one point. They're the Satan of gaming, so there's that. And, well, of course there will still be people that buy their shit anyway, because brand loyalty, or just sheer boredom. Maybe we're just all depressed and need some comfort. I don't know. Find comfort and solace in playing these old Medal of Honor games, because they truly are the best the genre had to offer. If you disagree, you're wrong. You're an idiot. If you try telling me otherwise, good luck. Good luck, because I refuse to believe you in any way, shape, or form. These games fell into obscurity for a reason, I get that, but I cherish them. I cherish them. They hold a special place in my heart. And if you don't like that, go fuck yourself. Seriously. Get the fuck out of here. Fuck yourself. Like, who doesn't appreciate childhood longing, you know, the longing for something as great as Medal of Honor Allied Assault to come back. Who doesn't have that appreciation for old games like this? I'll leave that for you to answer. I hope you all enjoyed this video. I'm sorry it got all long and drawn out, but hey, this went down to like 3 minutes or so. Oh, 2 minutes. Wow. Of free space on the camera. So, hope you all enjoyed this video. I'll be back later with some more, as well as a MOH video. Stay tuned for more videos. I am TheZOMBIEJ. I'll see you folks there. Have a good fucking day, and peace.